The great Puritan preacher Jonathan Edwards said, worship is basically an experience of beauty. We worship. Our response comes to the very beauty of God. So I chase church, if you're going to do something as wild and as dangerous as to claim that you are affiliated with the God of the Bible, at least do so in a way that leaves you open to the charge of being extravagant. Don't be a Uzzah who comes into His presence without taking God seriously. So my question this morning is for you. Will you dance or will you die? Two men today. In our story, one is dead. The other is dancing. I mean, what's the faith lesson? Specifically, what do the two of them teach us about invoking the very presence of God? Here's what the writer of 2 Samuel wants us to know. Chapter 6, verse 9. It's essentially the same question that David asks. He asks, how can the ark of the Lord come to me? How can it come to me? Translated for today, how can the presence of Yahweh God fill me? Church leaders ask it all the time. How can the presence of God come into our fellowship? How? The tragedy of Uzzah, son of Abinadab, teaches that God comes on His own terms. He gave specific instructions for the care of the ark and its mobility, and priests were to be solely responsible. And while they were not fit for duty, they weren't even ready to do it, according to Leviticus 16, if I read it right, until they had sacrificed for their own sins. And if that wasn't enough, they had to sacrifice for the sins of their family before they were ready. They had to not only use a pole, they had to use a wooden pole, but an acacia wood pole. The picture, I know, of a deceased priest slumped over the ark of God sends a rather sobering and a shuddering reminder to those of us who attend church every Sunday. And that reminder is, do not become lax with what is holy. God won't tolerate being confused with cargo on an ox-drawn cart. And God won't tolerate being confused with a personal butler who appears whenever we ring the bell. God comes on His own terms. He's told us that He comes when commands are revered. He comes when hearts are clean. He comes when confession is made. But what about David dancing? Well, he regroups. Priests offer sacrifices. Oxen, they're left in the stall. Special wood poles are used. And after 6 paces, 6 steps, David sacrificed 2 prize animals. And then, choose one of the 3. And then David did what? A, reverently bows his head in prayer before Almighty God. B, respectfully kneels in humility before the Creator of the universe. Or C, David, ceremonially dressed in priest's linen, danced with great abandon before Yahweh God. C, correct. 2 Samuel 6:14. You know, I can't find another instance of David dancing in the Old Testament. I looked this week. He doesn't do a Braveheart kind of a waltz over the giant Goliath. He doesn't do a 2-step jig over any of the Philistines in a battle that he's won. But when the ark of the Lord comes into the city of David, according to the Hebrew term for dancing, he rotated in circles, jumping up and down. And the clothing that he chose to get comfortable with for worship was his linen prayer vest, called an XT. That's what I called it this week. Extra long t-shirt. One commentator I read said it best. David removed all but his holy skivvies. So I just got to ask the question. Even though David is flamboyant, why wasn't he flambéed? Why? Nothing happens. The sun keeps shining, the birds keep singing, and the priests keep stepping. And David keeps twisting, Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I just have to look at this. Did it bother God? No, absolutely not. Yahweh allowed David to dance. God was coming to David's town and David couldn't walk solemnly. He couldn't stand still. Maybe God wonders how we do it. And together in the presence of God, we sit so still. When I hear a deep-throated rumble from a 1960s muscle car, it just steals my breath. Oh. When I hear the infectious giggle of a small child, it just stirs my senses. When I see the sight of a springtime tulip, it just nearly stops my heart. But none of them give me the reason for dancing. But I don't have to tell you, and I don't mind telling you, especially this morning, in this northwest portion of this room, row 1, I experienced what David experienced, and that is that God is with us. God's gift is His presence. I mean, after all, isn't that the promise of eternity? Isn't that why you're sitting here, if it's not just for salvation? It's that we're going to be with God in His presence. And when the presence of God came to Jerusalem to live among them, David not only danced, but he celebrated. That's right. David blessed the people of Israel. Sometimes we don't read far enough. We get kind of stopped at the ephod and then at the dance. I don't know about this. Read a little further and you'll see what he did. It's what we do here. He handed out loaves of bread and cakes to everyone in Israel. Make no mistake about it. Worship celebrates the very presence of God, the very presence of Yahweh. Uzzah's life cautions against irreverence. I know it's hard not to text during worship. I know it's hard not to look at your lists during worship. But Uzzah displayed no wonder. He shows little admiration. He shows little awe. He didn't demonstrate a sense of marvel. And God won't be cared for, cajoled, coaxed, commanded, conjured up, or called down. He is a holy and a personal God who loves and heals and gets involved in our lives. And that causes me to dance. Would you stand, please? I have a question for you. Will you dance or will you die?